Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm back. It's the Mad Hatter, that dude y'all love to hate. And I'm here to talk about what everyone's talking about right now, which is millennials. For the millionth time, right? So there was this interesting LA Times article about why millennials aren't having sex. Mind you, this is also happening in in the Japanese culture. It's happening in other places. It's not just millennials, but it's like it's happening all over the world. It's not just American millennials. So something's definitely going on. But this article by the LA Times was looking at why we don't have sex, because we're having sex at a significant lower numbers than before. And I have a lot of reasons to explain why that is. I mean, just by personal experience. I mean, I don't have the stats and numbers right here, but come on, man, whatever. Like anybody would give a fuck if I did have that, right? So let me go ahead and just talk about some of the criticism. And I can talk about some of the reasons later about why I think being a millennial and being around people, being a social person, and what I've seen and what I've experienced, right? But first, the criticism that this article pointed to was that millennials don't want to get involved with the emotion attached to sex, because we want to get back to work. Essentially, we want to get back to work and make money. Well, that's obvious that millennials like to work. I mean, this is the worst economic situation that we've had in a long time. But it's not just going back to work. It's the fact that millennials also have hobbies. They also have, we're ambitious. We have things outside of work that we want to fulfill ourselves with, as opposed to fulfilling ourselves with sex and other people, which oftentimes is empty. It doesn't really get at anything. Okay, yeah, you got a nut off, but now what? You know what I mean? Again, they talk about we don't want to deal with the baggage attached to relationships. Now, I will say that I think I do see a lot of people talking about, oh, I don't like my emotions and this and that, but I do agree that, emotions are a part of being human. You should embrace your emotions. Some people don't want to get into that, and I think a lot of people in this generation are anxious. So, at that point, I'll give them that point. And they also talk about, which I also very much agree with, is the online life. Puts a lot of emphasis on physical appearance. I've fucked around with dating sites, online dating sites, just like anybody has in this generation and in other generations, right? And yeah, it's the people who tend to, get most responses are motherfuckers who are pretty as shit, men or women, right? It makes everything much more, what do you call it? Surface level, much more materialistic. And not only, because of what you see, you only see people's personality. You don't get to feel it and be around it, and you can't charm people. But then there's this idea that, oh, I can keep swiping, and any moment, I can find somebody who's better. So you always know in the back of your brain that you can possibly find somebody else at a click of a button. What incentive is there to stay with the person that you're with? So there's that. There's this plethora. I mean, the options haven't changed, but the connections that we've had with people has changed. The way we connect with people, So that makes it easier to find more people, which makes it harder for people to stay in relationships and to want to stay in relationships. But it does make it easier to fuck to a certain extent. I'm going to go ahead and say, this article says, feminism. They quote a dude who kind of blames feminism a little bit, like, women who've been through trauma and kind of third wave feminism. And I kind of agree with that, because my thing is like, who's really in charge of having sex? Who's the gatekeeper of sex? Because if you think about it, dudes are having sex. Like gay dudes are having a lot of sex because they're dudes. But it's heterosexuals and lesbians that aren't having sex, because women are a little bit more complicated when it comes to sex, especially now that women have a lot more options now. The things that might have turned them on before, or there might have been certain societal clues, or societal cues that turned women off. But I think some of those cues are not there today, and some of those cues, what I might mean is like, back then you might have wanted to find a provider. That might have turned you on, a man who could provide. But women can provide for themselves now, so that's not going to turn them on now. You know what I mean? So women are much more free now to make their own decisions about the men that they want to get with. And I think that's some new ground that they're breaking through. And I think some of that transition is leading to less sex because, like I said, dudes are horny. Dudes are always willing to fuck. So it's not the dudes that aren't fucking. It's the women who are no longer consenting as much as they did in the past to fucking. And then drugs. They talk about drugs like antidepressants. There's a lot of people in this generation who have anxiety and mental disorders, and so some of the side effects of those prescription drugs are, libido inhibitors, or the side effect is that it inhibits your libido. I'm trying to wrap this up real quick. Let's see. The article also talks about how like people don't want to put in the emotional work. I can see that, like I talked about before. People don't want to deal with the baggage, but at the same time, what if you can't find mates? Like, because you got to really think about it. It's only like the top. It's only like the cream of the crop that's fucking. It's not everybody's not fucking. It's like the people who are fucking are the people who are like pretty enough to fuck. You know, you got to think about it. Like, you got to think about what women view in a mate. Women like men who are desired by other people and other women. So those guys are only going to be, it's like the top 5 to 10% or 20% of men. Most women don't desire a lot of guys. They only desire a specific type of guy, especially because women in their, what is it called? Like, standards, women's standards in men is a lot higher. Especially because women are very, very discriminatory in who they fuck. And they should be. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're discriminatory in the way that you, open yourself up to people, literally and metaphorically, that's going to have side effects on society. So I think that a lot of this, you have to look at how women's roles have changed over the years, right? And a lot of this is narcissism too. Like, again, like, come on, man. Like, when you're trying to get in bed with a woman, I'm only speaking from my perspective, but it takes work. Women want relationships. Dudes want to fuck. We're talking about sex. So this is, again, dudes want to fuck. So this whole situation is focused on women. Because women, I believe that women are just as horny as men, but they're not going to fuck guys for a whole host of reasons, okay? And that's a whole different discussion. And honestly, I kind of want to finish this off by saying, sex is overrated, man. Like, I think a lot of people are putting a lot of emphasis on this. Cause, I guess people are afraid, and it makes sense because it's your species that you want to preserve. There's like this innate feeling to do that, innate desire to do that. But it's overrated, man. Like, I think a lot of millennials, like the ones that aren't worried about fucking all the time, like, we're not trying to be liked, We're not trying to be accepted. We don't give a fuck. People who are so concerned about sex all the time, like, they define their lives like, oh, I'm not having a lot of sex. Like, people who pay attention, like, oh, I haven't had sex in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It's a little obsessive, man. Like, whatever. But, the last thing is, people aren't talking about, there actually was this article by the Daily Beast, but a lot of people aren't talking about, again, millennials don't have money. The whole courtship thing, trying to have sex with a woman costs money. I don't care who the fuck you are. I don't care. Like, someone prove to me otherwise. Women don't like to Netflix and chill, right? Because, my theory behind that is because they think it makes them feel cheap. But if you take her out to a movie, you take her out to dinner, and then maybe, y'all do something else, go on a little boat cruise or some sort of special something, yeah, she's much more willing to then give it up. But if you a broke motherfucker, like, being broke doesn't turn women on. Being broke doesn't turn dudes on. Especially if you're living at home with your parents. You can't. It's not that cool to have sex at your parents' house. You know what I mean? So there's a whole host of factors. But this is getting long. I'm gonna leave it there. Leave your comment. Like this video or don't like it or dislike it. Whatever it is, do you? I'm out.